Most developed countries have a focal point around consumption, and it seems that we all do it differently and similarly at the same time. Personal interests and hobbies are of no consequence, as it brings significance to the area of our life that isn't filled with professional advancement. Perhaps in this area, we give a bit too much power to a monster that we haven't respected. Addiction is a heavy-handed word, typically leading to severity and stigma regarding the person suffering from it. We often use extremes to excuse our personal accounts when deferring ourselves from those we judge. But addiction is and has been a broad term, an umbrella of sorts, that captures dangerous to offhand outcomes. Judgment is a natural human inclination, as is comparison. We typically suppress these feelings to blend in more with society. Naturally, when we spot addiction in others, we can assess, think to ourselves, at least I'm not that bad, or I'm nothing like that. I think we failed to gauge that although we are not in the same position, maybe we're just placed in a different point of the same spectrum. What if most of us suffered moderately, but has systemic cognitions to excuse what we feel? The American Society of Addiction Medicine defines addiction as a treatable, chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and the individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. There are substance addictions and non-substance or behavioral addictions. Behavioral or non-substance addictions can involve an inability to stop partaking in activities such as gambling, eating, digital use, or even working. Not to be confused with misuse, where momentous, catastrophic, or extremely high stress conditions cause temporary binges that do not lead to addiction. Addiction is separated from misuse by the frequency of it. We may binge a new TV show, then stop watching TV for a while. But if we have successfully binged watched TV shows or streaming platforms in general over the span of months, then perhaps there's a problem. If frequency is the measure of dependency, severity is measured by tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance is the brain's adaptation to the body's reduction in response to increased stimuli due to drug or behavior, leading to more intake to achieve the same satisfaction. Withdrawal is the experience of unpleasant symptoms provoked by the abrupt discontinuation of the substance or behavior that the body became physically or cognitively dependent on. All variations of addiction involve dopamine or immense impacts on dopamine pathways, as dopamine was previously thought to be strictly reward-based but is now found to be more closely linked to motives and motivations, leading to compelling cognitions. This is mainly due to new research identifying the significant and longitudinal impacts of desensitization on willpower and reward-based arousal. The influencers of addiction are biology, environmental, and development. Although there are no genes that cause addiction, there are several genetic factors that are associated with such outcomes. No one's doomed from the start, and we can't presume that it even makes it more likely. But it's more in a sense that it is more likely to predict versus not. Environmental includes the socialization process of an individual, economic status, and quality of life. Societal norms are considered to be a huge precedent in addiction, especially if some cultures promote it or don't. However, yet again, this doesn't cause addiction, but it does make it more likely. Development involves a combination of genetic and environmental factors during critical stages of development in a person's life, mainly in the teens and young adulthood. People in their teens and as young adults have historically and scientifically the worst levels of self-regulation, making them prone to risky behaviors and impulse. Everyone's trying to find themselves at this age, making them more fragile for such an outcome. Long-term uses have proven to lead to dysfunction in learning, judgment, decision-making, stress management, memory, antisocial behavior, and self-regulation. The earlier mild to severe forms of addiction occur, the more permanent the damage on human nature. Addictions are becoming more prevalent and increasing in dangerous number. Even something like addicted cannabis users increasing from what used to be 1 in 10 to now being 1 in 3. Leading to more diagnoses of induced psychosis to schizophrenia. Additionally, the growing phenomenon of digital addiction continues to rise at an alarming rate, and rightfully so, due to the little attention scientists and researchers have issued towards digital advancements. Such a concept can be split into 3 categories: severe, recovery, and casual. Severe addictions can be categorized as a form of chronic mental disease that have consumed the person entirely. Self-regulation is often non-existent, and every act or follow-on act is intended to lead to more pursuits of addiction. Tolerance is extremely high, leading to high frequency and dependency. Recovery is the stage of people's lives combating the current addiction and where they are the most prone to relapse due to the transition of severe addiction. Which brings us to the monster in the fog. Casual addictions can be defined as acute cases of addiction to substances or non-substances, leading toward infrequent episodes of addiction versus continuous addiction. In short, an addiction is still present, but does not completely negate a person's ability of self-regulation. Some common casual addictions can be smoking weed, gaming, infrequent gambling, alcohol, etc. Casual addictions can be typically perceived in forms of substances that do not cause immediate and physical addiction like various pain medicinals. Researchers and psychologists have been afraid to differ between normal human behavior or passion and hobby and the clinical condition, mainly because personal interest and casual addiction are perceived as equivalent data in self-reporting. To look closer at the difference, we'll use a commonly used example: video games. Although video games have become paramount as an interest and hobby for most of the world, acute forms of digital addiction have correlated with it. Technological advancements have led to immense forms of convenience. What is the difference between gaming as a hobby and being casually addicted? Severe addictions allow for a clear-cut answer: yes, but not casual addictions in reference to self-reporting, where most detriments of character or habit go unreported. Casual addictions are typically in our forefront. If a close friend asks us what we do too much of, we might be able to admit it, whether verbally and openly or cognitively, as we start to think on it discreetly and more objectively. But since we still function in other areas of our lives, we fail to see it as something controlling us and us not controlling it. The truth of the matter is only up to 6% of video gamers have an actual diagnosed and severe gaming addiction. The rarity of this statistic is important. Authentic introspection leads to the common answer of what we do too much of. How often has responsibilities or things we're accountable for have gone neglected because of a perceived hobby or interest? A hobby does not get in the way of responsibility, and addiction does. Although common in occurrence, casual addictions have affected and crippled society. Since casual addictions have become so common, it has led to a society of neglect, lacking less and less willpower, especially amongst the youth, leading to various forms of death scrolling and brain rot on several platforms. The issue is how these areas may be the only place we find success or continual success and have a purposeful motive to continue despite it not translating to character, moral, or even lively progression. This didn't happen overnight. Most neglectful behaviors can be linked to childhood and development, bringing the importance of environmental context, which is one of the leading influencers of addiction. Casual addictions and various forms of dependency can be linked to the improper development of people. One of the leading causes are from early acts of betrayal, whether through singular traumatic events or reoccurring suffering, leading to halts in development with the outcome of immaturity, making people less likely to enact forms of purpose or potential and are more likely to stay safe and comfortable, because that's representative of still being a child, having a necessity for homeliness and zero conflict or the need to escape chaos instead of conquer it, keeping ourselves in the ignorant dark and a slave to our own monsters. Now, if that was the end of the video, well, we'd be screwed. We've come to realize that there's a lot of things that we're not facing and there's a lot of things that we're not addressing. One of the things that I've realized is that an easy way to adjust or realize what our current issue is through 3 methods of self-implementation: introspection, practicing concepts of self-regulation, and then recording and monitoring. Naturally, introspection is just asking ourselves, what are our issues? Now, in therapy, this is an often case where the therapist will ask you, but luckily, enough information is out there in the world for us to gauge that answer for ourselves. The only thing is, how honest can we be about it? And how egotistical is our answer going to be? If we're not trying to actually grow or develop or move past certain things, we'll lie to ourselves. However, if we are pursuing something, then we won't. Another concept is practicing self-regulation. We need to understand that self-regulation is the idea of genuine self-control. And if our childhood is a statement of anything, it's probably because responsibility wasn't too high on our parents' parenting list. Just because we were not taught something doesn't mean we can continue the excuse of not teaching ourselves. If we're adults, then we're adults. Let's adult. Lastly, and one of the more objective ways, is record and monitor. Set alarms for things. If you know you have trouble stopping certain behaviors, then set things in advance that'll stop it for you. Something that'll blare into the obvious and into your consciousness that maybe this is something you should stop. There's obviously a lot of different phone apps that also can monitor and watch how much you engage in certain activities or behaviors in reference to your phone. Digital consumption has been a problem. And if we know we're having trouble with the solution, there are obviously tools to assist. Write down timely scheduling. Learn and figure out what things are taking bulks of your time that get in the way of things that you're supposed to be taking care of. The only way to really gauge and make these things effective is if we respect the rules and boundaries that we set for ourselves, which is obviously the point that ties it in all together. We have to respect what we're doing for ourselves. Now, I understand that a lot of my videos are tailored towards peeling back the uncomfortable layers of the issues we tend to disguise in hopes that we can perceive them as obstacles to overcome and not triggering concepts that we need to tyrannically defend. My videos will never be just informational or conspiracy driven. It'll always be some sense of introspection that I take from me and think about putting out into the world. We're all human. If there's a point that you could take away in the video, then take it. Let's not get defensive about true concepts. If something is real, then let it be real. And let's think about it in our own time and then come back to the world with a new perspective. As I started to realize my own habits and the habits of those around me, as well as information statistics that I found on research databases, I started to realize that casual addictions are something that's kind of slipping under the radar. We know of addiction, we know the stigma of it, but maybe we're not too sure the specifics. With that being said, thank you for everyone watching the video. If you like the video, like it. If you enjoyed the content so far, consider subscribing. If you dislike the video, then dislike it. Hopefully you'll never see me again, but leave a comment in the comment section down below for your perspectives on casual addictions, as well as what current addictions you may be facing or addressing. I understand that some are severe, and I understand that there's a little bit of in between, but that's the whole point of putting this forward, bringing things into the awareness of who I speak to, who I address, and who I can reach. Most of what I talk about in my videos are things that I've previously conquered or currently dealing with. And although it's the internet, personal truths are personal truths. We don't always have to take everything so personal, but we can be holding ourselves responsible. I wish everyone the best, and I wish everyone a good journey. Thanks again, and I'll go ahead, see you next time.